Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode. So it's May 5th. And for the foreseeable future, your farm owns you. All right, so what do I mean by this? I mean that we are in the midst of the busy season. Regardless if you're in row crop or livestock, we are hammering down in the busy season right now. And your farm generally owns you with everything that we have on our to-do list, everything that needs to be done out in the fields, in the lots, whatever the case is, right? And so what we're trying to deal with here is that weight of the workload and everything that needs to be done right now. So we're trying to go through this mental checklist in our head of trying to get everything accomplished. How should we accomplish these tasks? And then even furthermore, the weather is going to dictate all, so checking the weather multiple times a day, beginning of the day, trying to figure out, is this a good spray day? Is this a good planting day? Is this a good day that we should do something else? Is it going to rain in 2 days? Do we need to hammer down hard now so that way maybe we'll take a break and then it doesn't rain, so we keep hammering down? Trying to just do everything that we can to get it all accomplished, right? And the farm seems like it just takes it all. It just takes it all. And then we've got breakdowns in the midst of that. We're trying to face challenges, try to do the best that we can to make decisions. Is the ground conditions fit right now? Should we be planting right now? Is it too cold? Should we be waiting? Should we do this versus that? And all these other things. And there's so much going on. And all that weight onto your shoulders from the weight of the workload can be really overwhelming to deal with and can be really easy to succumb to as well. And so that's why in this week's episode, we're just going to be diving into that weight of the workload a little bit and the current feelings that we're probably having and how we can manage that and how we can ultimately work through that. So as I was thinking about this, there's a phrase from one of the books that I read the boys quite often at bedtime. And it's Farming Strong All Year Long is the name of the book. And it's called, the quote basically goes at the beginning, it goes like this: "In spring, the farm's a busy place. There's work to do, no time to waste." And we are feeling that currently, right? We don't even want to waste time. It's a matter of, okay, I don't want to waste half a day or even a couple of hours a day. If I could be doing this versus that, so I can maximize my time and just get the most out of it, right? And so on last week's episode, we touched on time a little bit, getting that return on our time. And so we're going to be getting into some parts of that. But furthermore, just managing the workload and what this all entails. And really at the end of the day, this can sometimes rob us of our enjoyment of the farm. And so that was going to be kind of my first talking point here, is literally having everything that we have on our to-do list causing us to not enjoy the farm as much. It's robbing that enjoyment because we're so immersed in having to get everything perfect, having to get everything right. And the phrase that comes up for me, or just kind of the thought process, is you've always heard that, farmers, we've got, whether it be 40 seasons in our life, 40 seasons, 40 cropping seasons. So really at the end of the day, that's not very many. So we don't want to waste a single one. We want to do the best job that we can. We want to be stewards of the land. We want to make money. We want to make the best decisions. We want to have good yields. We want to stand out amongst our peers. All these things add up on our shoulders on the day-to-day basis. And we want to, at the end of the day, also still produce for our family, be around for our family, be around for what's important, right? And so all of that can really, at the end of the day, rob us of some enjoyment of this life that we've been blessed with, right? And so it takes out some of the fun that we always have. And I always remember when I was a kid, back to thinking about that enjoyment and that fun that we had, just whether it be working on the farm, whether it be chasing dad around on the farm in the farrowing barns, taking care of the hogs, sorting hogs early in the morning. Maybe it's running around in the tractor and disc, and in the springtime, that first task that you get to do maybe is I remember harrowing the fields for planting alfalfa, or maybe disking up some ditches. And then finally getting that planter out and putting some beans in the ground or putting some corn in the ground, and then just getting after it. And all that sheer enjoyment of just being on the land, doing what you love, oftentimes gets robbed of us when we've got all this stuff on our plate, all these things that we're trying to tackle and trying to do, and all that workload that we need to accomplish, right? And so that workload can oftentimes and the weight of the workload can take away some of this enjoyment. What I will also say is, really kind of wanted to focus on the negative sides here, because at the end of the day, we also have to focus on the negatives as to maybe sometimes acknowledge why this is important, why we need to be focusing on this, why we need to do something about it, and not just let this be kind of part of the season that we're in. Because that happens all the time. We're like, this is just the season. We're just in the grind. We just need to get through this. We got to ask ourselves, could it be better? Could we maybe even have some of that enjoyment back? And then the negative sides, what are the negative sides if we continue to feel that weight of the workload and do not do something about it? All right. So I'd say it's pretty easy for me to relate the negatives of feeling the weight of the workload back to like core four. All right. Core four is the body, being, balance, and business. Those are the kind of the four areas that we tend to focus on within our life. So obviously, body. All right. Body's first. If we've got all this workload that we need to do, everything we need to accomplish, especially in the get into the go season, it's pretty easy for us to neglect our body. I do this all the time, and to where like I'll be just focused on going. All right. And so maybe I don't even pack a lunch. Maybe I don't even grab proper hydration throughout the day. I don't need what I need to fuel my body. Or even furthermore, don't take the time to get a workout in or walk in, or prioritize physical exercise. Yes, we're going. Yes, we're moving throughout the day, but that's not the same as taking intentional time for our bodies and for our physical health, right? And then another one there would be the being side of things. Maybe it's the spiritual connection. Maybe we don't have time to sit down and do the devotional in the morning because, hey, we got to go. We got corn to plant. We got corn to spray, all this other fun stuff, right? And so that's those two. And then balance. Balance, obviously, yeah. Well, you didn't make it home for bedtime stories, or you weren't there to help get the kids out the door, or you weren't there for supper again, right? And maybe we took off on a Sunday afternoon to go. It was a good spray day, so we went and sprayed. So we weren't around for the kids, or we didn't make it to their ball game, or whatever it is, this, that, or the other thing. It's a pretty big time of year where that balance, that family relationships with the wife and kids, or maybe those around us, tends to suffer a little bit, right? Tends to take a bit of a hit, tends to take a bit of a withdrawal, right? And so with that, that's obviously affected. That's obviously a negative side. And then even the business side, all right? As we're talking about business, the workload is within the business, right? But at the same time, the business side could be the multiple different facets of the business. Maybe it's just, you're solely focusing on the operations, not focusing on the finances, and we're not doing what we need to stay up to date there. Maybe even on some different things that are fairly important on the business side that we tend to neglect because there's so much to do on the operation side of things, so much to do. We got to get out there and we got to take care of everything on the farm, right? And I always say we got to make hay while the sun shines. And I completely agree with that. But that's also comes to a point where we say that because we put so much weight into taking full advantage of the weather when opportunities present themselves, that there's a lot of other things that can get neglected, right? And so that can obviously have negative effects. And I think it's important to highlight that to some extent, right? Highlight what those different negative effects are, because we don't want to lose sight of that. Okay. We don't want to just be naive and realize that they don't happen, because there's always going to be a downside to a lot of things that we're doing, especially in the busy season where we're just pushing and going and going and going and neglecting a lot of other things when we're prioritizing almost production over everything else, right? Literally, that's the phrase, production over a lot of other things else, right? And so with that, I just think it's important to highlight those different things. And then we can shift this and ask ourselves, okay, what can we do? But taking a step back before we get into that, I want to also just kind of go back to why this is relevant for us right now in our operation. I was thinking through, and I didn't even mention this at the beginning of the episode, this is going to actually be kind of a 3-part series here of the different weights and stressors that we're feeling within the operation. They're all going to be kind of intertwined. Forgot to mention that in the beginning of the episode. My bad. But anyways, this is going to be the weight of the workload is kind of the first part here, because this is something that I've been feeling more than anything. All right. As we get into spring, it's been windy. So all of a sudden, maybe we got a day like tomorrow is supposed to be a little bit calmer. Should we be taking advantage of that day to go spray? Even though I don't not necessarily geared up to spray yet. Maybe I was planning to wait to spray till after we plant. Should I take advantage of these days? And at the end of the day, all these decisions that we need to make in a pinch, and we don't know the right decision. We don't know if this is even the right decision we should be making now. Should we take advantage of the weather? Is it fine? We get so caught up and so wrapped up in all this that we can't be fully present with a lot of other areas of our life and a lot of other areas of the farm, because we're just focusing on the day-to-day operations, what needs to be done. Should we do this today while the weather's good? Should we wait for a rain day to take care of the rest of the stuff because it's not as important, but still needs to be done? Should we do this, that, or the other thing? Should we? I say that, but it's no joke because that's what consumes us. Is it's this constant barrage of decisions that we have to make, and we need to make them now, and we need to do the best job that we can, or we're going to fail. This is a tough year in farming. We got all this stress on our shoulders, yada yada yada. I say that because that's what we are dealing with right now as farmers, and myself included. All right, and so as things have gotten busier, as I sit here on a Monday trying to record this, I'm like, I've got 10 other things I need to be doing. But asking ourselves, being able to take that step back and realizing, okay, back to what can we do? And this is where I'm getting at here, is what can we do? All right. And most of us, by the way, are running at full capacity. And so for us to just create more time, I always remember that phrase with like, we just got to make more time. Just got to make more time. Well, I don't know about you, but folks, God only blessed us with 24 hours in a day. And thank God, because if we had any more, we'd just be burnt out. Or we definitely probably wouldn't spend them resting, right? And so it's really difficult for a lot of us because we're already tapped out, maxed out. If we're, for a lot of you guys that are listening to this, maybe your husbands, fathers, wives, mothers, we got a lot on our to-do list, running a business, maybe working in town and then still trying to run a farm on the side and still trying to raise kids, trying to be good parents, be present, have a good relationship with our spouse, take her out on date night once a month, or maybe it ends up being once a year, who knows. But we're just got so much on our to-do list, so much on our plate right now that we're maxed out. We can't find any more hours of the day. And if we did, by the way, we'd probably fill them anyways, we just because we got to be busy, we got to be moving and got to be doing stuff, right? And so with being at max capacity, right? Being at max capacity, always having the weight of the workload on our shoulders, trying to figure out what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, and if this is going to be the best decision of if we should even do this, right? A lot of this kind of comes down to a phrase that I was working with called, I shouldn't even say phrase, just because kind of this mindset of acknowledging what's important versus what's urgent, or the importance versus urgency. All right. And so those two things might sound like the same thing. You're like, well, aren't they the same? Well, no, they're actually quite different. And I think by acknowledging the differences on our to-do list of what's actually important, what's actually urgent, it's going to help us kind of work through this process, help us alleviate some of this weight on our shoulders to some extent, and just really focus on what's going to move the needle. All right. So we got to start with, okay, what is important? All right. And even literally defining what's important to you specifically, not necessarily even to me. I can tell you, sit here and say what's Garrett's definition of important, but yours is going to be different. So it's got to be for your context, by the way. All right. And so, I was just kind of looking this up and I was like, okay, sometimes I think it's helpful just to look stuff up. So, kind of asking ourselves, what is important? What does important even mean? And I'd say what the definition that I got back was anything that serves your long-term goal. That's what important is. All right. So the importance is anything that serves your long-term goal. All right. So, talking specifically on the business side, and we'll get to the other areas of Core 4 as well, but talking specifically on the business side now, because that's where most of the weight of the workload comes from, is the business. So, what's going to serve your long-term goals within your business? And by the way, do you even have your long-term goals? Do you even know what they are? Have you thought about them recently? Have you even took the time to establish them? But then furthermore, just even, I think we can all admit or all agree to some extent that one of our goals as a business is to keep the business alive. And so sometimes we got to realize, okay, the important thing here is what's going to help keep the business alive and profitable and thriving. And so that can be very hard to define. But at the end of the day, that's kind of, if we're going to put a definition on it, we got to realize, okay, what's important here is going to keep the business alive. All right. And that's how we help kind of establish the things that need to be done and when they need to be done. And now moving down to urgency and what's urgent. The thing about urgency and what's urgent is there will always be things to do that are urgent and that require your attention. All right. There will always be things that need to be done sooner than later. And there's always going to be things that we have on our to-do list that we feel are urgent. And that's the big thing there, that we feel are urgent. Or maybe they've been on our to-do list for a long time. We keep pushing them off and keep pushing them off. And finally, we just do them just to get them off of our to-do list, even though at the end of the day, they may not necessarily be what's important, what's prudent to keeping the operation alive, what is actually relevant to your long-term goals. So, kind of knowing that difference between importance and urgency is going to help us really define how we can accomplish our tasks on our to do list, right? And you must always do, by the way, once we define these, we must always do what's important first. We must always do what's important first. And I feel like that's where we kind of fall off here. And if we don't have that difference kind of laid out between all of our tasks, okay, what's important, what's to do list. So if we don't have that laid out, we're just going to do probably one, what's easiest, probably two, what's the squeakiest wheel, and probably three, the most things that we can actually check off on our to do list. We may not necessarily be diving into things that are actually moving the needle or that are the most important, that are going to get us closer to our long term goals, that are going to keep our business alive, right? So there's a big difference there. And I myself fall victim to not necessarily knowing what that difference is. Okay. And I say that because I think back to my to do list. All right. I think back to my to do list and I just kind of lay it all out. Sometimes I just want to be productive. And as a core, for me, myself as a core, this is just me, just is just Garrett Ruskamp, but I truly just want to be productive as much as possible. I feel like that just comes from human nature. It comes from being a man who wants to provide for his family. I just want to be as productive as possible. And part of wanting to be productive, I correlate being productive and productivity to my net worth to some extent. Not even my net worth, just my worth as a human being, as a man, as a father, as somebody who's trying to provide. I correlate being productive to my worth. Okay, so if I want to be productive, I usually feel like being productive means you got to be busy. You got to be doing stuff, accomplishing your task on your to do list. And that's usually just in the moment as much as possible, tackling that to-do list. So going back to my to-do list, if I laid out 10 things that need to be done today, and if I knocked out 9 of them, by golly, we're doing pretty good. But what if the one thing I didn't knock out was actually the only thing that was truly important? Okay, truly important. All the other things were just noise. All the other things were just things that were on my to-do list that kept me busy, that were, really urgent, quote unquote urgent, right? And so, but I felt productive. I felt good because I got some stuff done. But at the end of the day, do all those things that I accomplished that were urgent, did they get me closer to my long term goals? Well, maybe, maybe not. All right. And so that's that kind of also that question there that we need to bring up because I was thinking about the importance of the difference between importance and urgency. The hard thing about all of that is it's subjective and it's a matter of opinion. All right. And it's a matter of opinion. And really, at the end of the day, when it comes to opinions, I'll say the only opinion that really matters is yours and those closest to you. And it might just truly only be yours and your wife's opinion. All right. For you as a team, what is truly important. Okay. So being able to divine that, we don't always know the right answer too, by the way. We might feel like today the most important thing is X and doing this thing or that thing or the other thing. But looking back, we might think, well, that was wrong. And we can only learn from those things, right? And just do our best to kind of hone in on that moving forward. But the big thing is here is that is very subjective on what is truly important versus what is urgent because it's going to be different for each person. Each person's got their own worldview and self view, different experiences that they've had, yada, yada. Not going to go into that rabbit hole, but just knowing the difference between those two is going to help you really outline where we're going to go. All right. And really, so hopefully, kind of defining each task with important versus urgent. And so, going back to giving you some practical examples, I just mentioned before on my to do list. So, I keep my to do list on my notes app. That's just what works for me. And I would really encourage you to find out what works for you, something that can help you stay organized. But for me, I use notes on my phone, notes on my computer, the most out of any other app I rely on my phone. And so I pull up that notes and I've got my note for the week, basically. And so I lay out everything that we need to do. All right. And so I do try to some extent lay out, okay, what's important versus non important. I kind of categorized it actually as urgent versus not urgent. So now after thinking through this a little bit, I'm probably going to have to switch that up. Okay, what's actually important? What is urgent? Okay, because the urgent things are always going to be there and there's always going to be a pile of urgent things that we can do, right? Kind of going back to that phrase that my dad always says, if we're not doing something, there's something we're not doing, right? So there's always going to be 100 things on the to-do list. It's never going to be empty. It's always one of those things also when you're talking about, we've got all these rainy day projects, right? Well, it could rain for 100 days and we'd still probably have rainy day projects. And so when it comes back to my list here, going back to this practical example is trying to figure out, because most times, okay, even if we try to define the difference between, okay, so for the week, these are things that are important, these are things are urgent, but maybe not necessarily not important. So just knowing kind of the differences between those two different categories, and then laying out the day, laying out each day, trying to kind of tackle each day at a time, trying to break this down and simplify it as much as possible, because it can be really overwhelming when we try to look at the week and we're like, man, we got to do this, that thing, this, all these things, and all this just bucket full of stuff, right? And we get pretty overwhelmed. But if we can just lay out, okay, we've got four things, just four simple things this week that are truly important. All right. Now, today, Monday, whatever day it is, these are what I'm going to try to accomplish. And everything else is just kind of urgent. Okay. Everything else is just kind of there. All right. So that'd be kind of my practical tips for you as we try to figure out what to actually do here. Is just to lay that out. Try to find a system that works for you, and that you can even define that between those on your team, whether it be literally your employees or those around you, maybe a partner that you have, or just even you and your spouse, you and your wife, trying to lay that out and trying to figure out truly what's important. And even going back to that subjective versus, the opinion side of things, I feel like we tend to, this might be an area where a guy actually gets shiny object syndrome, or we get really, really caught off with what's maybe truly important. We might think that, going to, oh man, I'm just trying to think of an example. Going to plant some brome ditches is important, or going to sign up for this class or this course is important, or going to talk to this person in town is important. We might think that in our minds, maybe it is. But at the end of the day, sometimes that it can actually be helpful having an outsider's perspective come in, be here and be like, well, by the way, does that get you closer to your goal? And then as you take a step back and you realize, you might be like, well, maybe they're right. If we can swallow our ego, swallow our pride, and realize that sometimes we do actually get blinded a little bit by what we think is important versus what is just kind of taking up our time and our mental energy and capacity, right? Back to the capacity. We don't have any more capacity to actually give as much as we think we would do. We generally don't. We're already generally maxed out. So, what can we do to really outline what's important versus what's urgent, and have a practical way to do this? We can come back and we can reference on the daily, on the hour if we need to, whatever's going to help you stay on point and stay organized. All right. And then within this, the challenge that I have for you, is to be fully present with what's important. All right. So I say that because we might be having a task on our to-do list that is truly noted to be important. All right. So we might have that on our to-do list. But if we don't stay present within that important task, because we're thinking about all the other things that might be urgent and we're not actually getting to, it's going to be hard for us to give it our full attention for that task and to be staying present with that important task and to give it our all, right? So that'd be kind of another little challenge there, another little tidbit or bonus there, if you will, is try your best to stay present with what's important and to build upon that, by the way. To build upon that, we talked about the business side of things, right? But now let's talk about core four, your body, being, balance, and business, those core four areas, right? So if we can also stay present with what's important within each of those areas, because there's going to be, okay, for a body, what's truly important right now? Well, it's important for me that I stay physically fit and I feel good in everything that we're doing, that I feel my body. So let's be present with that. Let's do the best that we can to make sure that is important. And so we're going to prioritize that, right? And then same thing for those other areas, your being, your balance, your business. Let's actually acknowledge, okay, what's truly important. I mentioned that being present with what's important, because I feel like if we're all going to sit here and truly do our best to almost get outside of our head, get outside of the busyness, the chaos, the workload for just a moment, right? Get outside of everything that needs to be done, whether it be planting the corn, spraying the corn, cutting the alfalfa, feeding the cattle, processing the calves, all this and that and the other thing. If we can get outside of that for just 1 second, acknowledge what's truly important. By God, I hope that we have family up on that to-do list somewhere. I hope we have that somewhere included in what's actually important here. Because that's one thing we generally, and I'm guilty of it as well, is, hey, so what if I miss a bedtime tonight? So what if I miss them all this week? All right. So what if I wasn't there when the wife and kids went out the door in the morning? And I'm not trying to make you feel bad if that's you, because we've all been there, right? But just acknowledging to yourself, or even you as a family, you and your wife, what's truly important. And then if it is important for you to spend a little bit of time with the family, to spend a little bit of time with the wife each week, kind of reconnect and just kind of dive into everything as a team together, what do you need to do to get to that point? Make sure that is a priority because it is at the end of the day important. Okay. All right. So that's a couple things there to kind of get to wrapping this up a little bit. I really want to challenge you to do your best to really outline the difference on everything that you have on your to-do list, everything that's taking up your mental capacity right now. All right. So for me this week, we've got some dirt work that needs to be done. I got a custom drilling job we got to do. I got to spray some stuff this week, and I got to haul some corn. I got this, that, and the other thing, right? And so acknowledging, okay, what's truly important? What's going to help keep the business alive? What is something that needs to be done versus just something that is urgent, that's taking up my mental capacity, that's been on my to-do list? Can we keep punting it a little bit? Can we just punt it till next week or punt it till a rainy day? Can we just keep moving that down the road so that way we can focus on what's important, what's actually going to be serving the business, serving your goals, keeping your business alive. All right. That's what I'm going to challenge you to focus on. And within this, it's also important to realize that the workload is usually just the thing that's front and center, the thing that's taking up your most time, because it also kind of goes back to that thought process of just wanting to truly be productive. And if we're wanting to be productive, it also kind of comes back to just that working mentality, everything that's on our to-do list, the task, right? It's knocking that out. But that's not the only part of the battle here. That's not the only thing that we need to be focusing on as well. And so that's where kind of a teaser for next week's episode on this kind of series here, where we're talking about things that are currently stressing probably a lot of us out right now, is, talking about the weight of the workload. But then next week, what we're going to get into is staying sharp in the business when everything else is pulling for your attention. All right, so next week, we're going to actually be making sure that the business doesn't take the back seat. Okay. And so within the business, there's multiple different facets of the business. We talked about the workload. We talked about the operation. We talked about everything that needs to be done. What about the decisions that need to be made, the money that is made within the busy season, within the chaos, with everything else that needs to be done? Not forgetting about the finances and making sure that they're actually still a focal point of your business. So making sure the business doesn't take the back seat is going to be what we're going to be talking about next week. So stay tuned for that. But until now, or for now, I should say, hopefully you found value in this week's episode, guys, and do your best to figure out in your day today what's truly important. That's all I have. We'll catch you guys next week. Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram @GarrettRuskamp or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.